Let's get a read from Dr. Frank Contachessa, the internist over at Northwell Health. Doctor, thank you for taking the time. Very good to have you.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me.
An overreaction, doctor? What do you think? Shutting down in-person classes altogether in Chicago?
Absolutely an overreaction. It sounds an awful lot like an April of 2020 sort of a mentality. I live in Westchester County in New York, and my children's public school has been open really since day one. They've done a phenomenal job of keeping the schools open and keeping the kids in school. The kids need to be in school. We really haven't spoken much about the unintended consequences of keeping kids home. Suicide rates have gone up tremendously, especially in young girls and in boys as well. Anxiety and depression have skyrocketed. 1 out of every 4 young girls has complained of anxiety, and 1 out of 5 boys of anxiety and depression. It's getting worse out there. We have to keep the kids in school. They have to see their friends. They have to see their teachers' faces when they learn. We have to get past an April of 2020 mentality.
You know, Doctor, I was looking forward to talking to you because there are a couple of developments also going on here I wanted to pick your brain about. In Israel, they're talking about a 5-fold jump in antibodies if you have a 4th shot of the Pfizer vaccine. So that's not just 2 shots and a booster. That would essentially be 2 shots and 2 boosters. When does this get to be overkill?
I think we're there now, Neil. You know, when people are saying that, hey, the boosters are working for Omicron, the evidence that they're citing is that it's raising antibody levels. Now, without getting too much in the weeds here, so yes, obviously the boosters are increasing antibody levels, but they're the wrong antibodies. They're antibodies to a virus that no longer exists. They're antibodies to Alpha and the wild strain, the earlier forms of COVID that we were seeing back in 2020. So to raise the antibody level, I don't care how high you make them, it's not going to really help. I myself had COVID, probably Delta strain, about a month ago during the Thanksgiving time. And just coincidentally, I had had my antibody level checked during my own routine physical about a month before. And my antibody level from my vaccine regimen that I had early on in the course was sky high. And I still got COVID. So I don't care how high you make the antibody levels. I don't think it's really going to help.
Can you get, even with the vaccine, we know these breakthrough cases and they're very familiar, but can you get it even again?
Yes, you can, especially if you had an earlier form of COVID, you know, back in 2020. Omicron is so different than the earlier strains. I really think it should be considered sort of a new illness. The amount of mutations that we're seeing on Omicron change the characteristics. It changes the symptoms. We're seeing more upper respiratory instead of lungs. You know, people with the earlier forms, we're seeing lungs were burning, getting out of breath with exertion. Now they're coming in with sore throats and cold symptoms. So yes, you can get it again. But interestingly enough, studies are showing now that if you had Omicron, you can't get Delta. There's sort of this retrograde immunity that if you had the current form, that you can't get the earlier forms. And that's really good news.
You know, a lot of people are relieved to hear, despite the record number of the spikes in cases we've been seeing, Doctor, I guess we had an all-time high in this country of 1 million plus in the most recent 24-hour period. But very few are seeing severe cases of it showing up in hospitals or certainly in intensive care units. Is that your read of it, that it's not fun, but it's not super serious? I don't want to make light of it, but how would you characterize Omicron to this date?
Neil, you're absolutely correct. Actually, about 10 minutes before this call, I was scrolling through my email, and I had a update from the hospital that I'm on staff with here in Westchester, and the cases have gone up. There are some admissions. ICU admissions are not increased. There's plenty of ICU capacity across the system that I work for. We are not seeing severe cases. I personally have not put anybody in the hospital for COVID in weeks. I'm having tons of cases. I'm overwhelmed. It's one of the more challenging periods of my career just because of the volume of calls and visits. But they're overwhelmingly mild. I'm dealing more with the mass hysteria of, oh my God, I have COVID. What do I do? And
right.
you know,
I can
I'm dealing
understand
with dozens and dozens of these calls.
No, you seem to be a very calming presence. I appreciate that. But, Doctor, I am curious about your take on where all of this is going. Now, some have interpreted what's going to happen in the next few weeks as the final throes of this before things stabilize. You're the doctor, I'm not. Where do you see this going?
I agree with you, Neil. I do see that. I think we're going to peak here in the next couple of weeks. South Africa is on the downswing. They saw a 30% decrease in cases over last week. The week that ended last week, they were 30% down. As the reporter said earlier, the UK is stabilizing. And this was a very quick wave. I think our wave is still cresting. I think we're going to still see some increase in cases in the next few weeks. But I think we're going to start to see a downswing. I'm hoping in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And if the studies hold that the immunity conferred by Omicron is lasting and broad, meaning that it's going to cover the current forms, the previous forms, and we really should get some immunity for the future variants, because now there's talk about another one, IHU out of France. That's never going to end.
I've been reading about that. How serious is that one, Doctor? I've been reading more about it. The World Health Organization, I wouldn't say it's dismissing it, Doctor, but it's not alarmed by it. But what do you think of that?
Really, it's too soon to say. I have not seen enough data to be able to make a distinction. But if evolution holds, this is the way it works for viruses. They become far more transmissible and virogenic, but they become milder, because that's how viruses work. If a virus kills you too quickly, it doesn't spread very efficiently. So the forms that tend to spread efficiently through a population are the milder strains that let you walk around and cough on other people. Interestingly, Omicron is virtually as transmissible as measles, one of the most transmissible viruses that we know about. So we've never seen anything like this other than measles, which has been held as, the gold standard of the most transmissible viruses that we've ever seen. And this is right up there with it.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for taking the time and keeping us all calm. I think we all need to do this, especially me, Doctor. Dr. Frank Contachessa, the internist over at Northwell Health. Good read on all of